Here we go.
Okay, welcome everyone. I thought that studying Tehillim would be appropriate for this time, so I want to share some ideas from an article by Rabbi Balmo on Perek Kuf Chaf Vav Shir Amal B'Shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion, from ideas taken from this book, The Poetry of Prayer. Rabbi Balmo also writes for BBMs of your heart, so you can look him up on there. I was debating whether to share the text, but for such a short thing, fortunately, this is a parak of Tehillim we say Shabbos benching, so people know it fairly well. So we're going to do it without the text. So what we want to understand is what really the subject of this parak is. The parak seems to deal with some form of redemption, but if we look at the structure, it's somewhat unclear what it's actually talking about. In the beginning, in the first half, it seems like the parak is commemorating a historical redemption, right? B'shuv Hashem et Shivat Zion hayinu kecholmim. When Hashem brings back Shivat Zion, we're looking back and we're saying, Azim alei pinu shoninu rina, right? When Hashem redeemed us, when this seems like historical national redemption happened, our mouths were filled with laughter, filled with songs of joy. But the second half sort of changes tenses, and we move to a request that's actually asking for redemption for the future. Shuva Hashem return us, right, Hashem. So that sounds like a request for the future, and that's one switch we have within the parak. And secondly, the imagery of what the redemption we're talking about is switches. So in the beginning, and we said it seems like some sort of historical situation, Shivat Zion, right, when we come back. But the second half deals with a lot of agricultural imagery, right? Hazorim b'dima barina yiksaru. Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Right, going out, weeping, carrying seeds to sow will return with songs of joy. And so seems to be dealing with an agricultural issue and not this historical national redemption. So we'll quickly touch on three different approaches to what this Mizmor is about. Rashi and Malbim take the approach that this Mizmor focuses on a great historical event, the Shivat Zion, the return to Israel. And according to this, right, we're left to interpret the second half, which uses agricultural imagery as figures of speech, right, figuratively, some sort of metaphor. Rabbi Balmo quotes here Professor Efrati. I had to look up all these scholars he's quoting, so you guys can look them up afterwards, who agrees with Rashi that this is dealing with a specific historical event of Shivat Zion. And to explain, the Jews were exiled after the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, and they really sort of lost hope and thought that they would never be allowed to return. And about 50 years later, though, those who longed for Zion were actually allowed to return to their land. They were given permission to rebuild the Beit HaMikdash, right? The leaders of the time were Haggai and Zechariah, to place it in, right, Tanakh time. And that's what this first half of the Mizmor is thanking Hashem for, right? They're thanking Hashem for actually when they had lost hope and thought they'd never be able to come back, for this miracle that they were able to, Hashem allow them to return. But at the same time, they still face certain issues. First of all, only a very small percentage of the Jews came back at this time. And importantly, they didn't have total autonomy, right? They're under the Persians at this time. And so what Professor Efrati claims is the second half is actually an allusion to the desire for full Jewish sovereignty. They're not gonna say that straight out because they're under this foreign rule, but he borrows imagery from Yirmiyahu and from Yechezkel about these agricultural images that have to do with not having full sovereignty. And it's meant to be this coded message that is a tefillah for the complete and final salvation. A second option is so that's the first option, right, where this deals with Shivat Zion. The second option is to say the Mizmor is an agricultural one. And what is going on here? What's this redemption? The farmers witness a rebirth of their crops when the rains come, right? Hashem brings the rains and they have a rebirth of their crops. The problem is how to understand, right, the term in there of Shivat Zion, and the first half, as we said, it's not so clear because it seems to switch. And also not so clear why the beginning of the parak seems to talk about it as if it already happened, where the second half is like a request for this. And Rabbi Baumel raises a third option, which is to look at it and say that the two halves of the Mizmor are actually separate subjects. Right at the beginning is talking about this historical redemption, and the second half is asking for help on an agricultural level. And how do you put those together? So there's different elements of the redemption. When redemption begins, Hashem reveals himself, but in a limited way. So for some people at that point, they understand time has come back to Israel, make aliyah. But some people, right, they only have this first, not everything is in place yet, and they're holding back, waiting for the Gula Shlema or waiting for it to be more practical. And in the beginning of the Mizmor kind of reviews the historical events that mark the start of this redemption, but prays for more practical help so that more Jews will be able to come back, right? As the Mizmor says, kafikim b'negev. Once, right, we have more practical, the land, we're able to work the land, we're able to sustain ourselves here, then more people will be, who are waiting for those practical steps or waiting for more revealed, right, Geula, will able to come back. And I thought this is very appropriate. This Mizmor really reflects, according to any of these explanations, the Mizmor reflects standing on the brink of something big. Part of the Geula has taken place, but we're not fully there yet. The final redemption hasn't come. Not all the physical conditions are in place. And it felt very appropriate that that's exactly where we stand, and particularly appropriate as we begin to pray for rain, for Gishmei Bracha, literally rain, but also for the physical conditions that make Geula and Eretz Yisrael a practical reality to come.
All right, Shach, thank you very, very much. Same time tomorrow night, same place. See everybody.